Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We got a good one for you, as always, here. This is your Wednesday news flash. Just keeping it pretty simple. We got three very big, very important stories today. We are kind of going off the same theme as we did a little bit last show, but we're kind of doing it from a mirrored angle. First, we have the indictment in the Jack Smith situation, as we take a look at some of the accusations against him, which include efforts to retain power and really doing so by manipulating and trying to overturn the results of a Democratic election. We'll take a look at the kind of legal implications, the roadmap for the indictment, what comes next, when the trial is happening, obstacles to trial, all that stuff is to come. Meanwhile, again, we go to the political side. Biden and Trump are pretty much tied. I'm going to break that down. We saw the Republican look at things on the last show politically and talked about how good it was for Trump. Well, it's pretty incredible. Biden is in a very, very weak position heading into the 2024 race. Pretty remarkable stuff. Also, we have Labor's left wing, one of the most interesting kind of political groups in the world, in my opinion, that I like to kind of just follow, just due to the unique torture that they're always put through. How can they regain their strength back? We will discuss. All right. So we start with this. Here we have the January 6th case, the big indictment coming in. So we had the indictment coming in. This is from the Jack Smith case. This is indictment 3 out of 4 expected. The next one is said to be, again, this kind of Georgia-specific, Georgia-related kind of business here when it comes to, when it comes to the 5,011,000 votes, the Brad Raffensperger call, and all of this business that essentially, Trump essentially really tried to steal it in Georgia, even more than he tried to steal it nationwide through the January 6th situation. And they obviously had a pretty big debate, a pretty big discussion about how to proceed with this, and they have decided to go with the kind of special prosecutor Jack Smith coming out with the indictment today, and it's said to be in a few weeks, which, by the way, pretty interesting. In Fulton County, they're saying, essentially if, they use if, but we all know it's going to be when they indict Donald Trump. It's going to be a, no holds barred. It's going to be a perp walk. He's going to be booked and photographed, apparently. So we could get a fingerprint. We could get a Trump mugshot. Finally going to be one for real to put on all the T-shirts. Something that, we kind of, I think our country, as a country, we deserve a Trump mugshot. Like, come on. It's about time. It's got to happen. So the big accusation that they make against him here is that he lied about the 2020 election, and he knew it. The indictment laid out how in the 2 months after Election Day, Trump spread lies about widespread election fraud, even though he knew they were false, as he deliberately disregarded the truth and relentlessly disseminated these lies. Anyway, at a prolific pace, the indictment continued to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Of course, Mr. Trump has never been known for fealty to the truth. Again, it's a very, very fair point there from Michael Schmidt and Maggie Haberman, the true Trump OGs from the New York Times, kind of rearing back up into form, trying to get ready to go for, what is expected to be a pretty interesting election that we're going to get into in just a moment. But, I think, the first thing I'm going to say is nothing really to be that surprised about by any stretch of the imagination. We all kind of knew this indictment was coming. It's essentially some of the charges here, laying out some of the charges, 3 conspiracy counts. This is from, again, Charlie Savage in the New York Times. One of the charges, a conspiracy to violate rights, is Section 241 of the Title 18 of the United States Code. A conviction on this charge is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Congress enacted what is now Section 241 after the Civil War to go after white Americans in the South, including members of the Ku Klux Klan, who used terrorism to prevent formerly enslaved African Americans from voting. But in a series of cases in the 20th century, the Supreme Court upheld expanding the use of the statute to election fraud conspiracies like ballot box stuffing. In invoking the statute, the indictment frames it as a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. So essentially saying that these were, that vote counted part obviously going to be the pretty crucial part there. We kind of seen that this stuff is coming for a long time, and illegally, we don't really know too much, as of yet about the timetable on this, but it seems to be, a pretty damning judge. This case has been put in front of the only judge who gave January 6th protesters / rioters more jail time than what the government asked for. So she is somebody who is not very sympathetic. And this is going to be this is all about January 6th. So it's not going to be a particularly chill audience for the Trump team. Kind of a no BS person looking at this stuff. The indictment said the purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified, the indictment said. The indictment cites 5 means by which Mr. Trump and his accused co-conspirators sought to reverse the results of the election, including pushing state legislatures and election officials to change election votes won by his opponent, Joe Biden, in his favor instead. That is on the pretext of baseless fraud claims, the defendant pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, disenfranchise millions of voters, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of and voting by illegitimate electors in favor of the defendant, the indictment says. It also cited the recruitment of fake electors in swing states. Mr. Biden won, trying to wield the power of the Justice Department to fuel lies about the election conspiracy and pressuring Vice President Mike Pence to delay the certification of the election or reject the legitimate electors. And Mike Pence kind of is in a very, very interesting situation. Honestly, I don't think, he's in a very interesting situation that will probably, the best it's going to do is going to end up with, I could see him honestly on some sort of central, maybe not MSNBC, but maybe CNN, as a political contributor after he kind of drops out of the race and his political career, his electoral career is over. I could see him with a spot on CNN being like, Chris Licht, bringing him in there to take truth. Who better than to take truth to power under Donald Trump than somebody who, really turned up against him and so strong and all that stuff. Obviously, it's BS. It's just a whole kind of ridiculous situation here. And, I could honestly see some liberals just, not all. There'll definitely be a few resist libs that will get a little bit mad about this stuff. But I think it is kind of interesting to see that, it'll be interesting to see if that happens. It seems to be, kind of the most like maybe the Wall Street Journal. He'll have some sort of punditry job. But obviously this is not going to be, politically, it's not going to be very, very effective here. But he already is. He's trying to come out again as the kind of hard, socially conservative, most right-wing on abortion, but also somebody who says that Trump is corrupt, which is an interesting position to take. Not really get him that much. Maybe some richer Christians in Iowa will get behind it, but. After a campaign speech at the Indiana State Fair on Wednesday, Pence criticized Trump's reckless assertion that a vice president had the power to overturn election lawyers and said he was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers who kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear. And, obviously, that's kind of like saying the sky is blue and the sun is yellow. Like, let's be real. Pence reiterated a statement he made the night before in response to the federal indictment of Trump that anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And again, I really hate the stuff that all these, establishment people do where they want to criticize Trump, but they don't want to use his name. It happened a lot in 2016 and 15. It just looks so bad. Just say his name. Like, come on. So Trump actually responded to this. He says, I feel badly for Mike Pence, who is attracting no crowds, enthusiasm, or loyalty from people who, as a member of the Trump administration, should be loving him. He didn't fight against election fraud, which we will now be easily able to prove based on the recent fake indictment and information which will have finally be made available to us. Finally, a really big deal. The VP had power that Mike didn't understand, but after the election, the Rhinos and Dems changed the law, taking that power away. So Mike didn't understand. He didn't understand the power that he had. So it's so sad. You hate to see it. But anyway, throughout his careers in business and politics, Trump has sought to bend reality to his own needs, with lies ranging from relatively small ones, like claiming he was of Swedish and not German descent when trying to rent to Jewish tenants in New York City, to proclaiming that President Barack Obama was not born in the United States. If you repeat something enough, he is told his confidence over time, people will believe it. And honestly, I think it's pretty clear that he's dead on about that. By and large, though, the trait has served him well, helping him bluster and bluff through his way through bankruptcies and then to the White House and through crises. Once he was there, personal scandals, to impeachments, and a special counsel's investigation when he was in office. But now he's been held to account in a way he has never had been before. With a new special counsel, Jack Smith, he is asserting was a campaign of falsehoods that undermine the foundations of democracy. Already, Trump's lawyers and allies are setting out the early stages of a legal strategy to counter the accusations, saying that Trump's First Amendment rights are under attack, saying, obviously, I think the toughest thing they're going to have to do here is prove kind of in the trial, if the prosecutors can bungle this is going to be a relatively tough thing. Trump's lawyers are kind of already crowing about this, they're going to have to really prove that he 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, believed that he was, just blowing smoke up these people's asses and knew that he was blowing smoke up these people's asses. And I think, that could be easier said than done, because you can totally see Trump being like, generally believing, and or people at least not being able to prove otherwise, that he won this election and he was going to, by any means necessary, get a handle on it. And he was going to change the result. He was going to get Biden out of there no matter what. They say Trump had every right to express views about election fraud that they say he believed and still believes to be true, and that the actions he took or proposed after the election were based on legal advice, which, of course, as an American president, would be his right. The indictment and his initial response to set up a showdown between those two opposing assertions of principle that what prosecutors in this case called the pervasive and destabilizing lies from the highest office in the land can be integral to criminal plans, and that political speech enjoys broad protections, especially when conveying what Trump's allies say are sincerely held beliefs. I think that part there is probably going to be the most important, whether or not these beliefs are going to be considered sincere, whether or not they're going to be, okay, this guy, he may be crazy, but he actually had these beliefs. I think that's going to be something that will probably be the hinge that this case swings on, and probably to a good extent the Georgia case as well. All right, we now move on to our next story in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, so we do go on to our next story. And it's the kind of political, kind of the mirror image of the political that we looked at on the last show. Is again by New York Times and Nate Cohn here, writing this Siena polling up. He writes, after the Democrats fared well against MAGA candidates in the midterms last year, it might have been reasonable to think that President Biden would have a clear advantage in a rematch against Donald J. Trump. Yet, despite the Stop the Steal movement, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and the numerous investigations facing Mr. Trump, Biden and Trump are still tied, each at 43% among registered voters in a first-time Siena poll of the 2024 cycle. The possibility these criminal indictments haven't crippled Trump's general election chances might come as a surprise or even a shock, but the result is worth taking seriously. It does not seem to be a fluke. The Time Siena polls last fall, which were in the 22 midterms, is what they're talking about, also showed a very close race in a possible presidential rematch, including a 1-point lead for Trump among registered voters in our final October survey. Trump's resilience is not necessarily an indication of his strength. In most respects, he appears to be a pretty badly wounded general election candidate. Just 41% of registered voters say they have a favorable view of him, while a majority believe he committed serious federal crimes and say his conduct after the election went so far that it threatened American democracy. But Biden shows little strength of his own. And I think it's definitely clear to say, it's just really a sad state of democracy. But honestly, I think this election is going to come down to how much support does Biden lose for being too old, too ineffectual, too weak, essentially. Just the old, I think the old plays a lot into the ineffectual in terms of politics and things like that. Honestly, I don't think there's one single thing that Biden had done, or kind of a host of things that Biden had done that's going to be really driving people out to the polls, to vote against him in droves. I think it's just this kind of feeling that this guy is unfit. He is too weak. He is not effectual. And I really think that, obviously the economy could be, I think, a pretty key disconnect that's really drawing down Biden's support. But we will get into that as well. And then on the Trump side, obviously, the pretty blatant thing is how much are people going to want to, just say we want to overthrow the system, but we do not want, or we want to, burn down, we want to hurt the system. Just like these Trump supporters are these kind of, independents, these people that only Trump can bring into the polls, these, working class voters, mostly white working class voters, but also increasingly, some Hispanic and black voters as well, kind of in the working class position that, are they going to be worth, is it really going to be worth, trying to burn up the system, trying to, shake things up with, again, with Trump after all these criminal indictments? And, if the perception is he going to be just too much out for himself? And again, you can't really run a campaign that's about saying, Donald Trump is selfish. He's not going to really support you. It's like, it's been done before, and it really has not worked. So it's kind of puts Biden in a pretty interesting situation. And, because there is, no vibrancy from the Biden campaign. It's just increasing weakness, increasing corruption, and it can't really go against Trump's corruption, in a bigger way. Just like we saw with Hillary Clinton, just as Trump used, Bill Clinton's sexual crimes, let's be honest, against Hillary when she was trying to call Trump a rapist and all that stuff, and Bill and Trump both are, and Hillary helped Bill cover it up. I think that's kind of a clear fact at this point, at this juncture. You can't really you can't call as much Trump corrupts when Trump is going to just turn around and say, "Look at Hunter, look at your son, look at Hunter." But yeah, like there's just another situation about that today, or yesterday, where there was already some major closed door hearing. Honestly, I really have a hard time getting myself motivated about it, but the effect it's gonna have is the same thing it had in 2016. I think this election's gonna be, barring COVID, it's gonna be a lot closer to 2016 than 2020, and 2020 was an incredibly close election. That a lot of people don't really realize in terms of the margin of the key states. It comes down to 100,000 votes separating the two out of tens of millions, I think it is. Or 100, I think it was 120 million votes. I may be pulling that number out of my butt, but so it's it really is going to be coming down to a pretty close situation here. Biden not showing strength of his own, despite him improving an economy. His approval rating is only 39%. 2 points higher than it is in our poll, or was in our poll in October. before the midterm election. At least for now, he seems unable to capitalize on his opponent's profound vulnerability. And honestly, I think I had, because again, that's where you're coming from if you're Joe Biden. I think there's this broad sense when it comes to about, you got to kind of be macro about it, because that's the way the most American people are thinking. Coming out to these the people that Republicans, at least Trump and the Trump Republicans turned out, if they want to do well. They may be turned off by the indictments, but there could be a bunch of people turned off by the fact that it's a weak economy, but it's an improving economy, but it's a weak economy. But broadly, clearly, there seems to be, again, no sign of life, no sign of vibrancy, no sign of new ideas, no sign of change, and really just no sign of really the lights being on in the White House increasingly. And Americans are just being asked to, sign on to 4 more years of that with Kamala Harris as the VP. And I think that's just not going to be a very successful situation. And I mean, I was just like a lot of people, kind of arguing back and forth on Twitter. And it's really kind of remarkable, like the blinders on that a lot of liberals have about this stuff, and it's like a kind of a back and forth situation that he's making with Matt Christman on Twitter, the host of the Chapo Trap House, who came on Newsflash and just yelled at me for 30 minutes, but still is probably one of my favorite political analysts out there, hands down. Make it a pretty banal but pretty obvious point. Anyone being annoying about the danger of Trump ending democracy, about how the danger of Trump ending democracy is real and needs to be taken seriously, should consider being annoying to the party that's about to run a senile crook with a sub 40% approval rating against him. If they're not, then they're full of shit. You got to be, again, it's the continuous basic mindset. The Democratic Party can't fail, it can only be failed. It's this constant mindset that even if they run somebody whose son is pretty obvious and blatantly corrupt, this is going to be used against him. And it's going to make pretty much all charges, all this indictment stuff way less. Just like the same thing that happened with Hillary trying to attack Trump for the ground by the pussy tapes. That is essentially how things turned out. And it's pretty clear. I think a lot of people though really just got mad at that, because it's just there's something really in the minds of a lot of liberals. There's a lot of people out there being fundamentally critical in any way, really in any basic way, especially when Trump is down the pike. About the Democratic Party just seems fundamentally insane. It's just something that they reflexively cannot do, even as things look incredibly bad, and they do not look great. Trump is definitely weaker, but Biden is fundamentally, he was not an incumbent, wasn't dealing with COVID. People were way more desperate for a change. 2020 was a different time, and it was a 10 times, 100 times more of a crazier time. Biden, through 4 years, way weaker. Trump also quite a bit weaker, but, I don't know. Honestly, I don't think really it's as weak. Democrats can't necessarily assume the race will snap back into a clear Biden lead once people tune into the race either. The 14% of voters who didn't back Biden or Trump consisted mostly of people who volunteered, even though it wasn't provided as an option in the poll that they would vote for someone else, or simply wouldn't vote if those were the candidates. They know the candidates, they just don't want either of them. It was turn out 100% is going to be going down in 2024. It's reasonable to believe that Biden has the better path to winning more of those voters. They dislike Trump more than they dislike Biden, and the political environment, including promising economic news, seems increasingly favorable to Biden, but it hasn't happened yet. Bottom line, though, is both candidates coming in incredibly weak. But if Biden could turn around the economy, it always comes down to the economy. If Biden can actually, maybe use some of that mainstream media magic, figure out, the disconnect between popular opinion and the data on the economy here, and how it's affected. Because honestly, I've seen some theories. None really seem to resonate with me about why there is this major disconnect between the Biden approval rating on the economy and the actual numbers of the economy, which wage growth relatively up, inflation coming down. But broadly, I think my personal best guess is, unless he can kind of convince enough people that there is some there with his whole administration and really just broadly his brain, that even if it's not him, at least there's maybe, I don't know, switch the VP, I don't know, to maybe a more popular Democrat. I feel like there just needs to be some sort of excitement. There needs to be some sort of jolt of energy to say, look, we are still here. We still, want to move the country forward, because people, I think that is the big thing they just, don't buy yet. But that with the economy could make for a very interesting picture. But all in all, it is, to say the very least, a jump ball, although I still give the slightest edge at this early juncture to Biden. But, it all does remain to be seen. All right, now to our last story. It is, we're taking a trip across the pond here, and it comes to do with the Labour left. They obviously have been marginalized after being in control under former Labour leader there. This is obviously the UK Labour Party that we're talking about here. They were, in control, the socialist left, as opposed to the neoliberal center of the Labour Party. They were under control with Jeremy Corbyn from 2015 to 2019, suffered a brutal election loss for a lot of factors, and had been sidelined by what was a true neoliberal, but kind of a, democratic socialist unifier, pretender who turned into being Blair on steroids, Keir Starmer. And he is now, he's now in the driver's seat in the party. And the question is, how can the Corbynites, the Labour left, gain back control? And they write about this in Jacobin. One of the intellectual leaders of Corbynism, the late Leo Panitch, concluded in his final book with the hopeful observation that the 2019 election defeat concealed a substantial rejuvenation of socialism in Britain, the fruit of a unique generational collaboration between the Labour left, formed in the 1970s, and a new one that would carry the project forward. Well, how's that going? Obituaries for the Labour left, whether it's boomer or millennial strands, are sadly low-hanging fruit at this point. No match for the former director of public prosecutions, Keir Starmer, and his right-wing coup. Veteran leftist figureheads, Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott, are suspended from the party, sitting left-wing officials at all levels of government are routinely vanished from their candidacies on any formal pretext. Side note, the current kind of right-wing leader of the Labour Party has been stopping left-wing candidates from running in local, regional, mayoral, and even national elections, like MP elections, under the Labour name for quite some time. And it's been on incredibly spurious grounds. There has been some efforts to get people out and running as independents. That hasn't really gone as well, but there's been some encouraging prospects though. But it's an important thing to look at and continue to follow. But worse, though, as I've complained before in Jacobin and beyond, this is James Smith, by the way, writing in Jacobin, what political propositions have the Labour left and the broader Corbynism ecosystem have managed to come up with in defeat have tended towards anti-political technocracy and are, to put it kindly, far from equal to the times. Things seem impossible, yet recent events should act as a reminder that we've done impossible things before. Two such possibilities occurred within the first year of Corbynism, and I propose that returning to their lessons presents a way out of this current deadlock. Younger readers may not recall that the turning point in the 2015 Labour leadership election that allowed Corbyn to wholly distinguish himself from his new Labour rivals was the party's edict that Labour MPs show their toughness by abstaining on, rather than opposing, the welfare reform bill proposed by David Cameron's Tory government. As John McDonnell remarked at the time, the bill's sadistic and arbitrary cuts to household income for the poorest was something one should swim through vomit to oppose, but Corbyn, alone among the leadership candidates, did so. This simple presentation of the moral difference between Corbyn and his mainstream Labour rivals was an important turn in the fortunes of the Corbyn candidacy, which had previously been assumed to be impossible. Apart from the overcoming the impossibility of being elected from the left at all, the second impossibility with the Corbyn project was its survival of the chicken coup of June 2016, when 44 shadow cabinet ministers, Keir Starmer among them, resigned in an attempt, as current leader by the way, in an attempt to force the end of Corbyn's leadership. They said, all in kind of his shadow cabinet, which is essentially the cabinet that he would have were he elected, all resigned and said, you have to resign as well. It is difficult to mentally reconstruct how utterly extraordinary Corbyn's refusal to resign in that situation was. That impossible act proved the resilience of the generational compact on the UK left that Panitch described. It gave the pretext for Corbyn to elevate young left-wing allies into senior shadow cabinet roles, and crucially, it contributed to the clear water between Corbyn personally and the establishment Labour brand, a populist advantage in the snapshot election that followed a year later in June 2017. It was also a reminder that every advance of socialism in Britain requires the humiliation of the ordinary decorum of the Labour Party, which, by the way, is a very interesting point for not only the Labour Party, but for the Democratic Party as well. I think these people, the clear water needs to be, it's something to be said that, redefining the Democratic brand, getting clear water from the neoliberal 1990s on Democratic establishment brand is going to be a key thing for anybody hoping to ascertain power from the left in really any situation. I feel like, whether it be abroad in England or whether it be kind of home here in America with the Democratic Party, it's just something that I really think needs to happen. Like these people, it needs to be shown that the rules, the standard rules as they were written are, just not fit, as they say in England, not fit for purpose anymore. These are the stories that should be kept in the left's collective memory. But what good are they now? To the first, the 2015 welfare bill that sealed Corbyn's victory contained among the earliest formal references to a 2-child cap on benefits in Britain, i.e. withholding tax credits and other benefits after recipients parent a third child, which the Conservatives brought into effect in 2017, the 2-child policy, essentially. By some historical quirk, the 2-child cap is again driving political conversation in Britain this month after Starmer announced that an incoming Labour government would not abolish it, despite the policy directly keeping hundreds of thousands of children in poverty. To those who remember, the dynamic is 2015 all over again, not least when Corbyn's current media appearances condemning the cap coincide with the surprise polls that place him the most popular current or former Labour leader, while the media salivates over the prospect of the circus of him running again against Labour for either London mayor or his own current parliamentary seat of Islington North next year, which I think he should absolutely run for Islington North yet again. To the second, the memory of Corbyn in the left's negotiation after the 2016 chicken coup presents a lesson for responding to the affairs surrounding Jamie Driscoll. The Labour Metro Mayor for the North of Tyne is one of the most conspicuous promoters of Corbynite industrial policies in local government, and last month was barred from standing as a Labour mayoral candidate at the next election. He was targeted with the same kind of preposterous and sordid charges of proximity to the magic A word, anti-Semitism, specifically for speaking alongside filmmaker Ken Loach, that had become routine in Starmer's Labour. Driscoll has announced that he will run as an independent and immediately attracted well over $100,000 in small donations in the course of a few days, which is pretty incredible. Election was on GoFundMe, literally. Starmer will recall the humiliation of then Prime Minister Tony Blair in 2000 when left-winger Ken Livingstone was elected London mayor as an independent after the Labour Party machine was deployed to stop him running under its banner. It's a little bit of a different situation than the chicken coup, as it's been a long time since a Labour left MP was in a position to resign from anything in protest, even if they wanted to, but the Driscoll moment presents a far better alternative. A concerted series of appearances by Labour left MPs alongside their comrade Driscoll would force Starmer's hand in one of two directions. He either overlooks the misdemeanor and the left claws back some autonomy for the first time since 2020, or more likely, he withdraws the whip from them all, presenting a galvanizing moment for the wider left structurally similar to, even if inverted from, the coup from 2016. And further, with independent runs by Driscoll and Corbyn as its prize, the energy would be in service of a project free for now of the albatross of the Labour Party. One of the most frustrating things about the labor left's timidity and inertia since 2020 is how unnecessary it's been. Back then, as one of a tiny number of writers in the mainstream press making the case for Rebecca Long Bailey, the kind of successor to the Corbyn agenda that ran after he resigned in 2019. It was a pretty damn tough job. I argued that the innovative community wealth building industrial policies that were her portfolio had been underutilized in the 2019 election and are still the main card the left has to play in Britain. This would mean awarding government contracts to small and medium and local businesses while offering state support to help them pay a living wage and to secure their green credentials, ending Britain's addiction to outsourcing globalized companies and turning back the Thatcherite new labor market revolution from the local level up. This is a program that can be pursued at the national and, as Driscoll shows, the local level in good times, electoral times, or bad, within the Labour Party and without. It is also a program that is something to offer precisely the small business people and disgruntled, economically nationalist Brexit supporters who most needlessly feared Corbyn and whom many of us have argued would be more productive coalition partners than the fair-weather liberal professionals whom Corbyn prioritized in post-2017. This policy platform for the political unrest on the left has sat preserved in amber since 2020. Today's uncanny repetitions of the opportunities of the welfare bill and the chicken coup that launched Corbynism in its first year finally offer the chance to break it out again. If only what remains of the Labour left can recover its ability to take some chances. And again, sticking their neck out, doing things that, try to move the ball forward. Again, especially as we talked about in the context of Joe Biden and the kind of just nothing, the lack of any there, put it mildly, it could be a pretty interesting lesson for the Democrats to learn too. All right, we're back on Friday. It's Newsflash.